All right, let's talk about labels, um, how labels like destroy interpretations of things. So, um, there's this concept that the universe is energy, right? The universe is everything, and energy is everything, and this information is energy, right? So when you have information presented to you, and then you interpret that information is then changed in lieu of your mental state. So depending on the way that you interpret reality, you're going to interpret that message differently than how it was initially sent. And the reason behind that a lot is because of labels. Because you label these thoughts in your head, and then after you label them in your head, you then give them a meaning like that is personal to you. And when you do that, you then lose the secondary viewpoint of that, or like the other dimensions of that thing that was sent to you, being a thought or some kind of concept from another person, or from an external source, or from an internal source. Like internal and external are both also the same. So, but at the same time, it's interpreted differently. So, external information can only bring you so far, because most of the information that is there, it comes from this field around everything, and you kind of just grab at whatever information that you particularly want to look at, and then pull it out of the ether, which is like this fourth or fifth or sixth or eighth dimensional space where all this information is held. And it's like reaching through this dimension, grabbing that information and pulling it back. And then when you pull it back, sometimes you have to pull it back through this veil. And if you haven't done the work on yourself, or unlocked the codes to the veil, or like split it in a way that's not going to split everything, meaning like you had the ability to reach through this and then pull the information out without it becoming distorted to a significant point, then that information can be used to present to other people in a more realistic fashion. But like when you try to pull this information and you label it, as soon as you label it, you basically add another layer to that shield of the veil. So when you start trying to pull this information back, as soon as you put that label on it, it stops your hand from getting through, and you have to basically let go of some of that information before you can pull your hand back through. Or you have to let go of that label, which is that chain, and drop that and pull the information back through. So that's basically how labels like can really like mess up interpretations of like messages, and like as humans, the way that we've been like taught to grow up, we label everything. Literally, that is how we communicate with each other at this moment, is that we label something, and then we project that label to another person. And the person, they understand the label, but they don't understand our interpretation of that label. They just understand their interpretation of that label. So that's only a half a message that's sent, and so like once you start to recognize some deeper layers of reality, and start to pull through and pull your mind into some of those other dimensions, where you can recognize those thoughts and those emotions and those information bubbles that are presented to you, then you can start to let go of those labels and realize the concepts for what they actually are, which is just blobs of beingness everywhere. Which is okay. The blobs of beingness and information, they're all alive. So like that's another thing, is that like people don't realize that the nature of oneness means that every single thing in this world is alive. Isn't that crazy? Like, just as alive as you are. Just because you can't interact with it the way that you can with other humans doesn't mean that it's not alive. Or doesn't mean that it doesn't have the same consciousness that you are. And doesn't mean that it doesn't come from the same consciousness, right? It's just that consciousness is being projected as a light, or as a bottle, or a phone, you know? It's crazy. But all that's still alive because it's part of that consciousness which is alive. And that consciousness makes up everything. You know? So it's pretty crazy. So you can interact with objects, and it actually goes into that in the Law of One, where they talk about how they move objects with their mind, or like they actually produce objects with their mind, because they realize the nature of oneness between things, and they were able to tap their they were like, okay, the way that we move the rocks was that we tapped into the infinite rockness of the rocks, and we basically interacted with that informational field, or that consciousness that's inside of those rocks, and then they told the rocks to go wherever they needed to go, and then the rocks just did what they wanted to because they were the rocks, so they moved themselves around rather than moving the rocks. Like their perception was so different that they were able to perceive those rocks as being themselves, instead of being like, since they're energy, right? They came in physical form in a way, but they were light bodies, but they're energy, right? So they can energetically become other things and then move those things, but it seems like they're moving them from the being that they are, but all they're doing is just making their consciousness become that thing as well, to move it. So it's basically them moving another portion of themselves around, and that's what like telepathy is. If you guys didn't know that, it's when you recognize the oneness and everything, and then you can tap your consciousness into the consciousness field that is surrounding everything, and you can move things with that consciousness. I'm still trying to learn how to do that in like a physicality kind of sense. I just kind of like get the concepts very well, because like they just automatically download it into my brain, and all I have to do is just continuously like work on balancing myself, and literally just always being able to retain that information. That's all my that, and then I can talk to you guys about it. That's what my purpose is. It's just to like relay this information that I'm being downloaded to you guys, and to talk about some things that people literally have never talked about on YouTube, that I've never seen, at least, or Instagram, which I've been posting on also. But yeah, labels. I'll get one last thing about labels. Okay, how do I explain this? Like, if I didn't label, okay, you see me in the camera, right? You're looking at me. If I didn't label, or say I was you, right? And I'm you looking at me. If I didn't label this person in this camera as an image on a camera, then I wouldn't know the difference between me talking to somebody in person right now, or if this person was actually just a projection of a camera, right? That's one layer into it. If you go another layer deeper than that, you literally wouldn't know if it's a person that you're looking at in the first place, because you wouldn't have the label of the person. And if you go another layer deeper than that, then you would look around in your environment, and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between your environment and yourself, because you would stop labeling your entire environment. And then if you go even deeper than that, your environment would literally just disappear, and you would just be a point of awareness. And that's it. Pretty cool. It's interesting. But then you can, obviously, since you have the power to do that, you can also have the power to bring yourself back. So I wouldn't be afraid of becoming a point of awareness, because if you think about it, if you are one with everything, right? If you can cease creation, then you can definitely recreate creation, right? I mean, like, it's kind of like an endless loop of like only creation until you want to not create, and then you just kind of join back with the oneness, and then whenever you decide to create again, you can create again. But people fear change, and they fear like the end of things, when they don't realize that they're a part of everything. So they never end, really, unless they want to. But still, even if they want to, then they still don't end. They just start a new life, and they forget again the fact that they wanted to end in the first place. So it's just like a cycle. It's really interesting, though. Labels are crazy. And I hope you really enjoyed this, because some of the stuff that I say is pretty fun to say. So thank you.